The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training facility as Sarah Martinez adjusted her grip on the M24 sniper rifle. She had been assigned to the elite reconnaissance unit just 3 weeks ago, the first woman to ever join their ranks. The other soldiers watched her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism, their whispered conversations following her wherever she went. Colonel James Harrison stood at the observation deck, his weathered face showing years of military service and battlefield experience. He had seen countless recruits come and go, but this particular assignment troubled him. The decision to integrate women into specialized combat roles had come from higher command, and Harrison made no secret of his disapproval. He believed that certain positions required not just skill, but physical and mental toughness that he doubted any woman could possess. Sarah had grown up on her grandfather's ranch in Montana, where shooting was as natural as breathing. Her grandfather, a World War II veteran, had taught her to handle firearms from the age of 12. She could hit a tin can from 300 yards with an old hunting rifle before most kids her age could ride a bicycle properly. But military training was different, and she knew that proving herself here would require more than just natural talent. The training facility buzzed with activity as soldiers prepared for the quarterly marksmanship assessment. This evaluation would determine who would be selected for advanced sniper training and eventual deployment to active combat zones. Sarah had spent months preparing for this moment, studying ballistics, wind patterns, and breathing techniques. She understood that her performance today would either open doors or close them forever. Colonel Harrison descended from the observation deck and approached the group of candidates. His boots clicked against the concrete as he surveyed the assembled soldiers, his gaze lingering disapprovingly on Sarah. The other candidates stood at attention, their rifles gleaming in the morning light. Sarah maintained her composure despite feeling the weight of every stare and whispered comment around her. The colonel began his inspection, examining each rifle and questioning the soldiers about their equipment. When he reached Sarah, he paused longer than with the others. He picked up her M24, turning it over in his hands with exaggerated care. The rifle was standard issue, but Sarah had spent hours cleaning and maintaining it to perfection. Every component was precisely calibrated, and she had memorized its characteristics down to the smallest detail. Harrison hefted the weapon, testing its weight and balance. He peered through the scope, adjusting the focus and checking the mounting. A slight smirk crossed his face as he handed the rifle back to Sarah. His expression suggested that he found something amusing about the situation, though he kept his thoughts to himself for the moment. The other soldiers watched this interaction with growing tension. They all knew the colonel's reputation for being demanding, and his well-known views about women in combat roles. Sarah accepted her rifle back without comment, checking it quickly to ensure nothing had been disturbed. She could feel the anticipation building among her fellow candidates, each one aware that today's performance would have lasting consequences. As the morning progressed, the atmosphere grew more intense. The shooting range stretched out before them, with targets placed at various distances and elevations. The wind had picked up slightly, creating additional challenges for accuracy. Sarah noticed the small flags placed along the range, studying their movement to gauge wind speed and direction. These details would be crucial for long-distance shots. Colonel Harrison called the group to attention and began explaining the day's evaluation criteria. Each candidate would fire from multiple positions at targets ranging from 200 to 800 yards. The scoring would be based not just on accuracy, but also on consistency and adaptability to changing conditions. Sarah listened intently, mentally rehearsing the techniques she had practiced countless times. The first phase of testing began with closer range targets. Sarah watched as her fellow candidates took their positions and fired their rounds. Most performed adequately, hitting their marks with reasonable consistency. A few showed exceptional skill, earning approving nods from the observing instructors. Sarah waited her turn, using the time to study the conditions and plan her approach. When her name was called, Sarah moved to the firing position with calm confidence. She could sense the increased attention from the observers, knowing that many were waiting to see if she would succeed or fail. Colonel Harrison positioned himself where he could clearly observe her performance, his arms crossed and his expression skeptical. Sarah ignored the scrutiny and focused entirely on her target. Sarah settled into her shooting position, feeling the familiar weight of the M24 against her shoulder. She had fired thousands of rounds in training, But this moment felt different. The silence around her was deafening, broken only by the subtle whisper of wind across the range. She controlled her breathing, letting her heart rate settle into the steady rhythm she had practiced countless times. The first target appeared clearly in her scope at 200 yards. Sarah made minute adjustments for wind and elevation, her fingers moving with practiced precision. She squeezed the trigger slowly, feeling the rifle's recoil as the round left the barrel. The spotting scope confirmed a center hit, earning a few surprised murmurs from the observers. Sarah chambered another round and prepared for the next shot. Colonel Harrison watched through his binoculars, his expression unchanged despite the accurate shot. He had seen many good shooters over the years, and one successful hit meant nothing in the larger context of military capability. What concerned him was not just shooting ability, but the mental fortitude required for combat situations. He remained convinced that when faced with real pressure and danger, this female soldier would crack under the strain. The evaluation continued with targets at progressively longer distances. Sarah maintained her composure, adjusting for each new challenge with methodical precision. Her shots consistently found their marks, grouping tightly around the center of each target. The other candidates began to take notice, their initial dismissive attitudes gradually shifting to grudging respect. Even the instructors exchanged meaningful glances as they recorded her scores. As the morning progressed, the wind conditions became more challenging. Gusts picked up dirt and debris from the range, creating swirling patterns that would affect bullet trajectory. Sarah studied the environment carefully, noting how the vegetation moved and where the wind shadows fell. She adjusted her hold-off calculations for each shot, compensating for the changing conditions with remarkable accuracy. The intermediate distance targets proved more demanding, requiring greater precision and patience. Sarah took her time with each shot, never rushing despite the time limits. She understood that consistency was more valuable than speed, and that one poorly placed round could undermine hours of excellent performance. Her methodical approach began to impress even the most skeptical observers. Colonel Harrison found himself paying closer attention to Sarah's technique than he had initially intended. Her fundamentals were solid and her mental discipline appeared unshakable. However, he reminded himself that range shooting was vastly different from combat situations. The stress of enemy fire, the confusion of battle, and the weight of life-and-death decisions would reveal the true measure of any soldier's capabilities. The other candidates had completed their evaluations with varying degrees of success. Most had performed competently, though a few had struggled with the longer distances and changing wind conditions. Sarah's consistent accuracy was becoming the talk of the range, with instructors quietly discussing her performance. Some seemed genuinely impressed, while others appeared skeptical that such precision could be maintained under pressure. During a brief break, Sarah overheard fragments of conversations about her shooting. Some soldiers expressed genuine admiration for her skill, while others questioned whether range performance would translate to real-world effectiveness. She ignored the chatter and focused on preparing for the final phase of the evaluation, which would test her abilities at the maximum distance. The afternoon brought new challenges as heat shimmer began to affect visibility at longer ranges. The thermal currents created distortions that made precise target identification more difficult. Sarah had trained in similar conditions, learning to read the mirage patterns and adjust her aim accordingly. She knew that this phase would separate the exceptional marksmen from the merely competent ones. Colonel Harrison announced the final shooting positions, where candidates would engage targets at 600 and 800 yards. These distances required not just accuracy, but a deep understanding of ballistics and environmental factors. Sarah listened to the briefing while mentally reviewing her calculations for bullet drop and wind drift at extended ranges. As she prepared for the long-distance shots, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The months of training, the skepticism from her peers, and the constant pressure to prove herself had all led to this evaluation. She understood that her performance today would influence not just her own career, but potentially the opportunities available to other women seeking similar roles. The 800-yard target seemed impossibly small through the scope, appearing as little more than a distant speck against the hillside. Sarah made her calculations carefully, accounting for the bullet's trajectory over the extended distance. The wind had shifted slightly, requiring her to adjust her hold-off point. She settled into her final shooting position, knowing that these shots would determine her future in the military. The 800-yard line represented the ultimate test of marksmanship skill. Sarah positioned herself carefully, adjusting her bipod legs to achieve perfect stability on the uneven ground. Through her scope, the target appeared as a small circle against the distant hillside, wavering slightly in the heat shimmer. She had practiced this distance countless times, but never under such intense scrutiny. Colonel Harrison positioned himself directly behind Sarah, his presence adding an extra layer of pressure to an already demanding shot. He carried a spotting scope, ostensibly to observe her impact points, but Sarah sensed his real purpose was to witness what he expected would be her failure. The colonel had made his opinions about female soldiers clear through his actions, if not his words. Sarah began her pre-shot routine, checking wind indicators across the range. The flag showed a slight crosswind from the left, but she noticed the vegetation near the target was moving differently than the flags at her position. Wind patterns could vary significantly over 800 yards, creating complex challenges for bullet trajectory. She made mental notes of each indicator, building a complete picture of the atmospheric conditions. The first shot at maximum distance would be crucial for establishing her zero and confirming her calculations. Sarah controlled her breathing, letting her natural respiratory pause coincide with the trigger squeeze. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder, and she maintained her sight picture to observe the bullet's impact. The spotting scope revealed a hit slightly left of center, exactly where her wind calculation had predicted. Colonel Harrison grudgingly called out the hit, though his tone suggested he considered it more luck than skill. Sarah made a minor adjustment to her scope and prepared for the second shot. She had learned to block out external distractions during training, focusing entirely on the technical aspects of precision shooting. The colonel's skeptical commentary became just another environmental factor to ignore. The second shot struck closer to the center, confirming Sarah's wind reading and ballistic calculations. She was building a consistent group at a distance that challenged even experienced marksmen. The observers grew quieter as they realized they were witnessing something exceptional. Even soldiers who had initially dismissed her abilities began to pay serious attention to her performance. As Sarah prepared for her third shot, Colonel Harrison stepped closer, his voice carrying across the range. He commented loudly about the difference between controlled range conditions and the chaos of actual combat. His words were clearly intended to shake her confidence and disrupt her concentration. Sarah heard every word but refused to let his psychological pressure affect her shooting routine. The third shot struck dead center, earning an involuntary gasp from several observers. Sarah had achieved what many considered a nearly impossible level of accuracy at maximum distance. Colonel Harrison fell silent for a moment, unable to dispute the evidence he had witnessed through his own spotting scope. The target showed 3 distinct impact holes, grouped tightly around the bullseye. The rangemaster called for a brief break while targets were checked and scores tabulated. Sarah remained in position, knowing that her performance had exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own. The other candidates approached to congratulate her, their earlier skepticism replaced by genuine respect for her marksmanship skills. She accepted their praise graciously while maintaining her professional demeanor. Colonel Harrison walked down range to personally inspect Sarah's target. He measured the shot group with calipers, recording dimensions that would become part of the official evaluation record. His expression remained neutral, but Sarah could see the grudging acknowledgement in his eyes. The evidence was undeniable, regardless of his personal opinions about female soldiers. When the colonel returned from the target inspection, he carried Sarah's target with him. The bullet holes were clustered in a group smaller than a silver dollar, representing shooting that would be exceptional even for veteran snipers. He held the target up for all the observers to see, his silence speaking volumes about the quality of her performance. The final phase of evaluation involved rapid target engagement, testing a marksman's ability to acquire and hit multiple targets in succession. This scenario more closely resembled combat conditions, where snipers might need to engage several threats quickly. Sarah understood that this test would challenge not just her accuracy, but her ability to maintain precision under time pressure. 5 targets appeared at various distances and positions across the range. Sarah had 60 seconds to engage all 5 targets, with scoring based on both speed and accuracy. She quickly prioritized her targets, planning an engagement sequence that would minimize scope adjustments and rifle movement. Her grandfather's training had emphasized this type of tactical thinking alongside marksmanship fundamentals. The timer started, and Sarah began engaging targets from nearest to farthest. Her first shot struck the 200-yard target center mass, and she immediately transitioned to the next position. Years of practice had made her target acquisition smooth and efficient. She worked through the sequence methodically, each shot carefully aimed despite the time constraint. Colonel Harrison watched through his spotting scope, calling out hits and misses as required by evaluation protocol. Despite his reservations about female soldiers, he could not argue with the results he was witnessing. Sarah's shooting was not just accurate but tactically sound, demonstrating the kind of fieldcraft that separated professional snipers from recreational shooters. With 40 seconds remaining on the timer, Sarah had successfully engaged 4 of the 5 targets. The final target sat at 700 yards, partially concealed behind natural cover. This represented the most challenging shot of the sequence, requiring both precision and quick target identification. Sarah adjusted her scope power to better define the target's edges against the background vegetation. The wind had shifted during the rapid engagement sequence, and Sarah quickly reassessed the conditions. She noticed that the distant flags were moving differently than when she had started, indicating a change in wind direction that would affect her final shot. With precious seconds ticking away, she made rapid calculations for the new wind conditions and adjusted her aim accordingly. Colonel Harrison found himself holding his breath as he watched Sarah prepare for the final shot. Despite his prejudices, he could not deny the exceptional skill he had witnessed throughout the evaluation. Her shooting had been consistently superior to most of his experienced soldiers, and her tactical approach demonstrated genuine understanding of sniper methodology. The timer showed 15 seconds remaining. Sarah settled behind her rifle, finding her natural point of aim on the distant target. The crosshairs wavered slightly as she controlled her breathing, waiting for the perfect moment to break the shot. She had trained extensively for this type of time-pressured shooting. Learning to balance speed with accuracy, the timer continued its relentless countdown. The shot broke clean, and Sarah immediately looked through her scope to observe the impact. The bullet struck the target just left of center, still well within the acceptable hit zone. She had successfully engaged all 5 targets within the time limit, achieving a performance that would have been impressive for any sniper candidate regardless of gender or experience level. Colonel Harrison announced the completion of the rapid engagement phase, his voice neutral, but his expression betraying a grudging respect. The evaluation scores would not be calculated immediately, but everyone present understood that Sarah had demonstrated exceptional marksmanship capability. The other candidates congratulated her performance. Their earlier skepticism completely dissolved. As the formal evaluation concluded, Sarah began cleaning her rifle with the methodical care that had become second nature. She broke down the weapon systematically, inspecting each component for signs of wear or fouling. The M24 had performed flawlessly throughout the day, validating her careful maintenance and preparation. Colonel Harrison watched her weapon handling with professional interest. The colonel approached Sarah as she completed her rifle maintenance. For the first time that day, his demeanor seemed less adversarial and more genuinely curious. He asked about her shooting background, and Sarah briefly explained her grandfather's influence and her years of hunting and competitive shooting. Harrison listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. Other instructors gathered around to discuss the day's evaluations, their voices carrying across the range. Sarah could hear fragments of their conversation, including repeated references to her exceptional performance. Several mentioned that her scores would likely set new records for the training facility. The recognition felt validating after months of proving herself against constant skepticism. Colonel Harrison requested to examine Sarah's rifle more closely. His earlier dismissive attitude replaced by professional curiosity. She handed him the M24, and he inspected it with the thoroughness of an experienced marksman. The rifle showed signs of careful maintenance, with every surface cleaned and every adjustment properly set. He tested the trigger pull and examined the scope mounting with obvious expertise. The colonel's inspection revealed nothing unusual about the weapon itself. The M24 was standard issue, identical to those used by the other candidates. What had made the difference was not the equipment but the skill of the person behind it. Harrison had to acknowledge, at least to himself, that Sarah's performance had been based on genuine ability rather than luck or equipment advantages. As the afternoon wore on, unofficial word spread about Sarah's remarkable shooting performance. Soldiers from other units came by to hear details about the evaluation, and several asked to examine her target with its tightly grouped bullet holes. Sarah handled the attention professionally, neither boastful about her success nor dismissive of the genuine interest her performance had generated. The rangemaster began collecting targets and recording final scores for official processing. Sarah's target showed the kind of precision that military snipers spent years trying to achieve. The shot groups were consistent across all distances, and her rapid engagement sequence had been flawlessly executed. Even accounting for favorable conditions, her performance was genuinely exceptional. Colonel Harrison found himself reconsidering some of his long-held assumptions about women in combat roles. Sarah's shooting had been technically perfect, but more importantly, she had maintained composure under pressure and demonstrated tactical thinking that went beyond simple marksmanship. These were qualities that could not be taught easily and were essential for effective sniper operations. As the evaluation day concluded, Sarah packed her equipment with the same careful attention she had shown throughout training. She understood that today's performance was just one step in a longer process, but it represented a significant milestone in proving her capabilities. The conversations around her suggested that she had not only met, but exceeded the standards expected of sniper candidates. 3 days after the evaluation, the official results were posted on the unit bulletin board. Sarah's name appeared at the top of the qualification list, with scores that exceeded the minimum requirements by significant margins. Her performance had not only earned her a place in advanced sniper training, but had set new facility records in several categories. The posted scores drew crowds of curious soldiers throughout the day. Colonel Harrison studied the results in his office, comparing Sarah's performance to historical data from previous evaluations. Her consistency across all shooting phases was remarkable, showing the kind of reliability that military snipers needed in operational environments. He found himself forced to confront his own biases about female soldiers' capabilities in specialized combat roles. The news of Sarah's exceptional performance reached higher command levels within days. Military officials interested in the integration of women into combat specialties saw her success as validation of their policies. Sarah became an unwitting symbol of broader changes occurring throughout the military establishment. Though she preferred to focus on her professional development rather than political implications, advanced sniper training would begin in 6 weeks, giving Sarah time to prepare for even more demanding challenges. The course would cover advanced fieldcraft, camouflage techniques, and long-range ballistics theory. More importantly, it would include realistic combat scenarios designed to test students under extreme stress conditions. Sarah understood that her range performance, however exceptional, was only the beginning. Colonel Harrison called Sarah to his office for a private discussion about her future training. The meeting began awkwardly, with the colonel clearly struggling to reconcile his preconceptions with the evidence of her abilities. He spoke about the demands of sniper operations and the psychological pressures of combat, topics he had never expected to discuss seriously with a female soldier. During their conversation, Harrison learned more about Sarah's background and motivation. Her grandfather had served as a sniper in World War II, and his stories about precision shooting had inspired her career choice. She understood the gravity of the sniper's role and the weight of responsibility that came with the position. Her responses demonstrated maturity and serious commitment to her profession. The colonel found himself admitting, reluctantly, that Sarah's evaluation performance had been genuinely impressive. He acknowledged that her shooting skills exceeded those of many veteran snipers he had known. However, he cautioned her about the differences between controlled range conditions and the chaos of actual combat operations. Sarah listened respectfully, understanding his concerns were based on legitimate experience. As their discussion continued, Harrison began to share some of his own experiences as a young officer, learning to lead soldiers in combat. He spoke about the importance of mental resilience and the ability to make life-and-death decisions under extreme pressure. Sarah appreciated his willingness to treat her as a serious professional, rather than dismissing her capabilities based on gender alone. The conversation marked a turning point in their professional relationship. While Harrison remained concerned about the practical challenges of integrating women into combat specialties, he could no longer question Sarah's individual qualifications. Her demonstration of skill had forced him to separate his general policy concerns from his assessment of her personal abilities. News of Sarah's record-setting performance spread beyond the immediate training facility. Military publications requested interviews and senior officers visited to observe her shooting techniques. Sarah handled the attention professionally while continuing her preparation for advanced training. She understood that her visibility brought both opportunities and additional pressure to succeed. Other female soldiers throughout the military took notice of Sarah's achievement, seeing it as proof that barriers could be overcome through skill and determination. She received messages of congratulation and encouragement from women serving in various military specialties. Sarah recognized that her success had implications beyond her own career advancement. The weeks leading up to advanced sniper training passed quickly as Sarah focused on physical conditioning and mental preparation. She studied field manuals, practiced camouflage techniques, and continued her marksmanship training. The upcoming course would test not just her shooting ability but her overall suitability for sniper operations in combat environments. Colonel Harrison found himself taking a personal interest in Sarah's continued development. He provided additional training resources and arranged for her to work with experienced snipers who could share practical insights about field operations. His initial skepticism had evolved into professional support, though he remained concerned about the broader implications of women in combat roles. As the start date for advanced training approached, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The evaluation day had proven her marksmanship capabilities, but she understood that greater challenges lay ahead. The upcoming training would determine whether her range performance could translate into effective combat capability. 6 months after completing advanced sniper training with distinction, Sarah received orders for deployment to a forward operating base in an active combat zone. Her training scores had remained consistently exceptional, and she had proven herself capable of operating effectively under the extreme stress conditions that the course simulated. Colonel Harrison, now serving as her recommending officer, had written a glowing evaluation of her capabilities. The deployment represented the ultimate test of Sarah's abilities as a military sniper. All her training, from those early days on her grandfather's ranch to the intensive military instruction, would be measured against real-world operational requirements. She understood that combat would present challenges that no amount of training could fully simulate, but she felt prepared for the responsibility. Colonel Harrison visited Sarah before her deployment, offering final advice based on his own combat experience. Their relationship had transformed completely from those early days of skepticism and dismissal. He now viewed her as one of his most capable soldiers, regardless of gender. His concerns about women in combat remained, but he could not argue with the evidence of her exceptional performance. During their final conversation, Harrison reflected on how Sarah's success had challenged his preconceptions about female soldiers. He admitted that her demonstration of skill had forced him to reconsider assumptions he had held throughout his military career. While he remained cautious about broad policy changes, he acknowledged that individual merit should determine opportunities rather than gender stereotypes. Sarah's deployment proved successful beyond all expectations. Her precision shooting and tactical awareness earned recognition from both her immediate supervisors and higher command levels. She completed multiple successful missions, demonstrating that her range performance had indeed translated into effective combat capability. Her grandfather's training in military instruction had prepared her well for the demands of operational service. The combat deployment validated everything that Sarah's evaluation performance had suggested. Her ability to maintain precision under pressure, make sound tactical decisions, and operate effectively in challenging environments proved that gender was irrelevant to sniper capability. Her success opened doors for other women seeking similar opportunities in specialized military roles. Colonel Harrison followed Sarah's deployment progress through official channels and informal communication networks. Her success in combat operations provided concrete evidence that his evolved assessment of her capabilities had been correct. He found himself becoming an advocate for merit-based selection processes that evaluated individuals on their demonstrated abilities rather than predetermined assumptions. Upon her return from deployment, Sarah was selected for instructor duty at the same training facility where she had once faced skepticism and doubt. Her combat experience and exceptional marksmanship skills made her an ideal candidate for teaching new sniper students. The irony was not lost on anyone that she would now be evaluating and training. The next generation of military marksmen, Sarah's first day as an instructor, brought her full circle to where her military sniper career had begun. She stood on the same range where Colonel Harrison had once questioned her capabilities, now wearing the instructor insignia that marked her as a senior professional in her field. New students looked to her for guidance and instruction, judging her solely on her demonstrated expertise and teaching ability. The story of Sarah's journey from skepticism to success became part of the training facility's unofficial history. New instructor candidates learned about her record-setting evaluation performance and subsequent combat success. Her example demonstrated that exceptional ability could overcome institutional bias and preconceived limitations, inspiring others to pursue their own professional goals. Colonel Harrison, now preparing for retirement, often cited Sarah's case when discussing military personnel policies with other senior officers. Her success had influenced his thinking about gender integration in combat specialties and the importance of individual evaluation over categorical assumptions. He had learned that his role as a leader required adapting his views based on evidence rather than maintaining comfortable prejudices. Years later, Sarah continued serving as a sniper instructor, passing on the skills and knowledge she had gained through her unique journey. Her students included both men and women, all of whom received the same rigorous training and fair evaluation that she had once fought to obtain. Her legacy extended beyond her individual achievements to the opportunities she had created for others. The M24 rifle that had once been dismissed as worthless in her hands had become the instrument through which Sarah proved that skill and determination matter more than stereotypes and assumptions. Her precise shooting on that evaluation day had not just earned her a place in sniper training, but had challenged an entire system to reconsider its beliefs about human capability and potential. The Deadeye marks on her target spoke louder than any argument about what women could achieve in military service.